The story begins with the engagement of Psyche and the Prince Eros. The main protagonist Medea Solon watched as she thought to herself, it like they've all forgotten that it should have been me up there, not that woman. Two noble men gossip about Medea that her family is powerless now that they've been abandoned. I've even heard the Solon tried to assassinate a member of the royal family. Medea overhears this and tells them she'll remember them. The noble thought he'd gotten away with his insults since he wasn't punished. The next day the noble is found with his tongue cut out. Medea maids ask if they should send men to the south since Psyche is no escort. Medea likes the plan but rejects it because she will be the first suspect. Nevertheless, her feeling of anger won't go away. Psyche is buying a present for Medea. Eros asks if she does not know how to hate. Psyche avoids the question and responds, I was waiting for you to help decide the gift. The merchant presents Psyche with a gift which she likes, but Eros laughs at this. Psyche asks what's wrong. Eros says he likes it if that's her choice. He's curious how Medea will react. Medea receives the gift. The mailman states he must verify the opening of the gift. This causes a sudden outburst from a maid, but Medea calms her and said Psyche will soon be crowned princess and one day she will have to bow her head. Medea opens the present and stare at it for a few seconds and tell the messenger the lady must be concerned about her. After he leaves, Medea takes a lamp and shattered it until her hand started to bleed. The gift received was shown to be a blue ring which Medea calls a trinket. Medea makes a plan to poison Psyche, so she sends a letter to be invited for tea. Psyche is overjoyed and tells the maid to get the manner ready. When Medea arrives, the maid began to gossip about Medea, saying they fear she might harm Psyche. Medea then tells Psyche she heard she treated her servants like family. Psyche thanks her and Medea states it wasn't a compliment. Can't you hear them speak ill of me? If you can't control your servants, call them over and I will slap them. Psyche apologizes but is interrupted by a knight who tells Medea to leave because Psyche is in engagement with the temple. Medea says she wouldn't want to be holed up either. After her departure, Psyche is found unconscious, burning up from a fever. The knight believes Medea had done something to Psyche since she was fined earlier. The knight leaves to get a doctor and thinks, why would Medea poison Psyche since she already lost the competition? There's no reason for such dirty tricks. I also tested the tea for poison. They even drank from the same cup. The knight horse suddenly throws him off and runs away. The knight is confused but then sees Medea behind him. The knight is terrified and tries to speak but only asks why before Medea stabs him, ending his life quickly. Medea's knight Helios suddenly reveals himself and disposes of the body. He asks, will Psyche die, my lady? No, she will wake up soon. After all, it's all under my control. Psyche is eating with her family but she is worried about her knight, and it shows. Psyche leaves for the temple to do a sacred ceremony. The servants are worried about the knight. Two servants volunteer to him. They leave and as they're searching, one of the servants says she can go alone. He responds it's too dangerous. She says maybe he got lost. He was born and raised here, there's no way that would happen, something must have happened to him. They spot a man with white hair. In his possession was the knight's clothes. The male servant began to yell at the Marquis Helio. Afterwards, Medea bribed a priest to give her a key to enter the temple through a secret passageway. The priest tells Medea his priesthood is at risk. Medea responds, I know, that's why I'll let it slide that you dare to cover your face. I'll trust you because of Lord Helios' recommendation. The priest guides Medea into the passage back to Helio, who has cut the face of the servant. The servant thinks he has the face of a shelter nobleman. I was wrong, he's incredibly strong. The servant grabs the leg of the female servant and tells her to run. She walks past him and takes the coat from Helio. He is stunned. He begins to remember how the maid was. He says, was it all an act? Lady Psyche cared about you. How could you betray her? She murmured, that's why I told you I wanted to go alone. Helio tells him he talks too much and stabs him, ending his life. Medea finds Psyche and sits next to her. Medea asks Psyche if she expected her because she doesn't look surprised. Psyche responds, where is my knight? Medea, caught off guard, tries to deny it but is tackled to the ground. Psyche begins to cry and asks Medea why she hates her and she never loved the prince, all she wanted was the power of the crown. Medea responds, should I childishly swoon over the prince and play house when I could have a kingdom under my thumb? Medea pushes Psyche away but falls into the water, but miraculously she could still breathe. Believing it's a divine power, she prays to God to let her rule instead of Psyche. As she prayed, Psyche attempts to rescue her. Suddenly Medea's eye opens and she is in a new place. Medea is confused and asks who they are and where are her servants. A maid begins to cry and says she doesn't know why bad things keep happening to you, Lady Psyche. Medea gets out of bed and stares into the mirror and sees Psyche reflection. She thinks it's a dream but dismissed it quickly. Eros barges into the room and tells Medea he's glad she's okay. And he was tormented by the thought of losing her. He swears Medea will be executed for her crime. Medea is overjoyed. At that moment Psyche wakes up in Medea's body, and thinks she is dreaming. She slaps herself and feeling pain realize that this is reality. She begins to worry about who is in her body. She rushes to the exit. The servants warn her that the prince wants to see her as soon as she wakes up. Psyche grabs her head and tells the servants not to call her Medea, and she must go to the duke's manor immediately. Medea tells Eros not to kill Psyche, because she must have had her reasons. Medea thinks to herself, that was close, I almost asked for her head. Eros tells Psyche he expected this, but is interrupted by a commotion outside. It's Psyche attempting to enter, saying she wants to speak to the lady of the manor. The guards tell her the prince is visiting, so she cannot enter. Psyche is relieved that the prince is there, believing he will recognize her at first sight. The prince opens the door and grabs her by the neck and tells her she should be grateful her neck has not been removed from her body. Medea watches this unfold and attempts to contain her laughter. She thinks how they used to act like star-crossed lovers, but he can't even recognize her now. Psyche was banned from entering the manor, and Eros assured Medea that she will be safe. When he leaves, Medea inspects Psyche's body, thinking that it's so fragile and even her breathing is sweet. Her thoughts are interrupted by a maid who approaches Medea with a trembling voice and tears confess that she is a spy of Medea and that Medea was the one that killed her knight. The maid claims she worked for Medea because of her sick brother. Medea comforts her and says she must have been so scared. Medea thinks she should cut her tongue out, but instead she let fate decide. If dawn breaks and Medea returns to her original body, the maid dies. If not, she lives. Dawn breaks and Medea says the maid is lucky. As for Psyche, she is wondering how she will survive, since Medea has many enemies but is stronger than all of them combined while she is weak. Her thoughts are interrupted by a maid who brought her meal. The maid stutters and fears she will be hit. Instead, Psyche thanks her. The maid is grateful. Meanwhile, Helio became anxious since Medea isn't replying to his messages, and it's the first time they've been out of touch for a long period. He leaves for Medea's manor immediately. As for Medea, she is enjoying a stroll with the prince. Medea thinks she will be empress after the prince's birthday and the emperor dies, but there is a problem. Psyche's parents are too overprotective, and she won't be able to leave. She needs to get in contact with Helio. She told Eros she wants to go to the market to celebrate her recovery. Eros tells her he also has business there. Medea buys a message bird and waits on Eros. She thinks he's keeping her at a distance since she isn't allowed to enter the room where they are discussing the affairs of the kingdom. Nevertheless, it's a smart move since they're not married. Eros finished his meeting and saw Medea reading, and sneers at her, saying if she wanted to read, he would have brought her a picture book since the book she is reading is too difficult for her. Medea thinks this is no way to treat someone you claim to love. Then she notices his gaze is not one of compassion but one of contempt. Eros asks, why aren't you answering? Medea begins to cry and tells Eros she didn't want him to worry and whispers in his ear. They go to the carriage to talk in private. There we see Medea crying, claiming she had lost a part of her memory. Eros says, you must have been so upset that I didn't notice. Medea replied saying, no, I was only upset that I lost the precious memories that we shared. Eros embraces Medea. Medea thinks he embraces me as if he's worried, but I believe we're both worried about something different. On the other hand, Psyche is fearful from the time she had switched bodies. She has only been having dreams of being killed and seeing the prince with sword in hand. She tries her best not to show it. Helio had just arrived. Psyche greets him and Helio does the same warmly. Helio scans the area and everything seems calm, but that only made things suspicious. Helio tells Psyche it's the first time she had braided her hair. Psyche felt as if her throat had just been cut. Medea's father intervenes and tells Helio his daughter and him should spar. This made Psyche anxious. She had never lifted a sword in her life. Everyone in the manor gathered to witness the two spar. Helio asks Psyche to go easy on him. Psyche begins to panic, thinking the greatest knight in the kingdom is telling me to go easy on him. How strong is Medea? Psyche takes up a sword and is surprised by its light weight, and realizes that she has the same strength as Medea. Helio begins to remember, when he was young and Medea taught him how to use a sword. Helio grabs the sword and says this is a two-handed sword. There's no way someone like Medea would make such a novice mistake. Who are you? Psyche wonders how she'll get out of this situation. In the years she has known Medea, she knows how she'll react. She tells Helio, how dare you talk to me like that, you brat. She points the blade to his neck. Helio thinks she's acting, but if she isn't Medea, then where is the real one? What if I'm mistaken? Helio grabs the sword and places it at his neck, and tells Psyche he must be punished. He brings the blade close to his neck until blood starts to fall. Psyche throws the weapon away. Psyche tells Helio that's enough. He apologizes for causing a scene. Psyche tells him he may leave. Helio reminds her the imperial banquet will begin soon, so he asks if he can be her escort. Psyche stares at him and thinks that he looks like he wants to cry. She replied saying yes Helio, if not you who else. When he leaves, Psyche's hands began to tremble, thinking to herself, she has survived Helio. Helio has just arrived home, a servant greets him, he tells him something funny happened. Medea called him Helio, she hasn't called him that since his coming of age ceremony.